I think there's a lot of us out there, and maybe people don't want to admit that they have issues around people pleasing, but I really think there's a lot of people that do. A lot of people that I talk to, so many of my clients, my students, we're all struggling with it on some level. I think it's frustrating because when we do it, often we don't seem to have any control. And then it causes these sort of after effects, these ruminations, these late night guilt parties, self-doubt, and even regret for not having the ability to stop in the moment. And so many of these issues, they can really mess with our cognitive functioning. Did you know that the majority of the people-pleasing behavior that we humans exhibit is really just a combination of our primitive brain that is left over and hadn't evolved, like our prefrontal cortex, with a set of neurotransmitters that are called the feel-good hormones. Yeah, there's 4 of them. And more often than not, it's your brain that's the culprit for why you get so frustrated at your people-pleasing behavior. I struggled with this for a long time until I understood what it was. Often, the kind of behavior we're dealing with when we talk about people pleasing, it's stuff that we take immediately to heart. As soon as we can't stop the behavior, we start beating ourselves up like there's something wrong with us. I'm here to tell you today, of course, we play a part in it. It's ultimately about your brain. The bigger picture of this behavior that so many humans struggle with, it's not your fault. And there's nothing wrong with you if you're actually struggling. There's so much more to the story. It's actually behavior that was well intended back when humans lived in these communal tribes. It's only ever trying to save you. I know that's hard to believe because especially people pleasing, I hate that. And when I learned that the whole point of people pleasing is actually part of my survival mechanism and that my brain is trying to save me, I was a little resentful. Okay, let's be honest. So much of it doesn't have anything to do with us. It's just human nature, a lot of it. It's amazing. I love watching my students' minds blown and the massive behavioral change that happens immediately when they can put the bat down and stop beating themselves up. It's not you necessarily. Part of it is you, like it was me. Once you understand what's going on, then you can take some agency back from your lizard brain who loves to hijack it from you all the time. It's life-changing when you really understand the neurology behind a lot of what we do. It's because of our brains. So let's start out with these 4 feel-good hormones. These are neurotransmitters, also called stress hormones. And they're released in our brain and then they cascade through our bodies. And then there's lovely enzymes that come along and chomp them up when they're done. Dopamine is the one I want to focus on today because it's the most relevant to people pleasing. It's known as the feel-good hormone itself. It's also known as a seeking hormone. It is associated with seeking pleasurable sensations, like when we discuss the motivational triad of our brain. Our brain wants to do 3 things. It wants to seek pleasure, as in safety. It wants to avoid pain, as in don't be dead. And it wants to conserve as much energy as possible because at any moment it's ready to run away from the bear that's hiding behind your car or whatever. But our brain doesn't understand that there's not a bear walking down the sidewalk, right? It's a neurotransmitter that is crucial to the brain's reward system. And it learns over time by trial and error what it believes that's important. It's subjective, okay? What the brain believes is rewarding and what is not rewarding. Now, whether it actually is or not for the long haul of your health and safety, that's another conversation. And it's the reason that our brains learn to seek out good behavior and avoid bad. There's also an alerting component to it. That is what that whole seeking safety thing is all about with the triad. The good provides reward, seemingly. Everything your brain is seeking is trying to save your life. So identifying patterns of good provides reward, which is what it's seeking, such as, for example, finding food or water. This tells our brain that these things are good, that we need more of them. So let's remember to get food and water. That feels good. And often the dopamine rush is released in the anticipation of a reward. It's not getting the reward itself. These particular neurons spike pretty significantly when there is the predictability of a reward. There's also significant activity when something bad happens or an expectation of something bad happening. There has to be this anticipation or this runaway feeling, like this predictability of good or bad. That's what we're talking about. The thing, though, is that we don't always have to like what dopamine is motivating us to do. And that's where control gets in the way. There's a lot of behaviors and habits that we do that we seemingly think that makes us feel better, but ultimately it doesn't. It also reinforces behavior and habits that it subjectively thinks is good or bad. It has a lot to do with the activation of our ability to evaluate situations as the evolved creatures that we are. This is what makes us different from the animal kingdom. Our brains, they seek answers and solutions to problems. Answers and solutions are a reward in themselves. So dopamine's only goal is to seek an anticipated reward and avoid the bear. But it can turn any behavior into a wanted behavior if there has been reinforcement over time to want to achieve whatever that behavior's result is. Even if we cognitively know it's not good for us. The way that we think and behave because of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, which means our brains can change. We can technically rewire our brains by how we think, which is why I teach mind management and thought work. And there's this reinforcement over gradual time, like trial and error, that teaches our brains when we get that dopamine burst and when we don't. What that says to us is, this is food and water. It's good. Let's do more of that. We're going to wire our brain into that pathway. Or this is bad, and we're going to rewire our brains away from that. That's how this is supposed to work. Out there in this world, there is so much that confuses our survival mechanism because this starts to mess up our cognitive functioning. Our brain doesn't know what's good and what's bad. It confuses our brain into knowing what direction to go. If I'm so happy doing this thing that I know is not good for me, but the neurons start activating in my brain, when we're doing this stuff over and over again, we are literally reinforcing actual neural pathways in our brains to tell ourselves this is good because it feels good. We're getting dopamine bursts in our brains, the feel-good hormone. And so our survival mechanism is saying, oh yeah, that's good. Let's go in that direction. That's a good one. But it's not, because we have a brain that's trying to save us by doing everything it shouldn't. It's like, oh, you like the donut? Oh, that feels good. Yeah. Donut. That's a good thing. Donut will save us. Yeah. Exercise. No. Bad. And again, it's the brain doesn't want to exert energy. It is only looking for pleasure, which equals safety, right? Donut, pleasure, not safety. But I'm not really sure our brain understands that because it wants us to go in that direction because we've reinforced that neural pathway. And we've also reinforced avoiding the gym because we feel yucky when we think about that. It's supposed to work to save us. It's supposed to protect us. And it has turned entirely upside down. What this does is causes what's called a reward prediction error in our brain. So we're constantly having errors, user errors, typically. The error is such as whether something is indeed an anticipated reward that's actually good or it's something that's not. This is subjective. We teach our brains through this rewiring of our neural pathways by reinforcing behavior because it feels good, because bursts of dopamine going off like fireworks in our brains. And we do not reinforce behavior that often is good for us that we don't want to do because our brains don't want to exert energy. And the gym sounds like energy. There could be a tiger chasing you at any moment and it needs to be able to run. None of this has anything to do with society today. All these things that are supposed to save us, keep us safe, keep us healthy, they're working against us. One of the most important key factors when we're talking about stuff like people pleasing is that there needs to be a surprise factor. Our brains anticipate and they predict reward, just like hopefully they can anticipate and predict danger. That's why we have rewired these neural pathways so that our brains remember, oh, take that path and there's the food and water that you need to live. And if we take this path, that's the saber-toothed tiger who's going to eat you. We've rewired our brains to know, let's go that direction, not this direction. The thing your brain wants the most is predictability. So, for example, let's say you walk into your boss's office and maybe your boss is not easiest person to work with, but you have been working really hard. You just finished a project and you are so proud of yourself. You know you did a fantastic job because you're educated and competent and amazing at what you do. And you can assess whether or not you've done an amazing job. And you go in and you are anticipating a pat on the back because a lot of how we understand if we're doing a good job is by the responses that we get from others around us. Now, that doesn't mean we go seeking that in some unhealthy way. It's like getting your report card. Somebody's graded your paper and they've said, hey, that's an A, or, oh, you need to work on this. We need a level of feedback that is in the sort of praise category to know we've done a good job. And again, that is going in the direction of safety, keeping our job, family, salary, all of that is important. But you walk into your boss's office anticipating, your brain is predicting that you are going to get that reassurance that you've done a great job, everything's great. And you are met with criticism or no response at all. Your brain doesn't like that because it absolutely anticipated a reward and it didn't get it. And in that moment, when you're anticipating this thing and you don't get it, that is when that reward prediction error occurs. User error, like your brain stops functioning for a hot minute and it doesn't know what to do. Therefore, because it's a seeking hormone, it starts to seek solution. It starts to need to fix. It starts to look around and say, what is going on? Because I wasn't able to predict this negative outcome that has happened. And so your brain now, the alarm starts going off because something has happened out of left field, like you didn't get that affirmation that you really thought you were going to get. Your brain becomes disoriented for a moment. Some of us maybe longer, shorter. I mean, we're all different. But the science is that your brain becomes disoriented when you do not get what your brain is predicting. And so it sets off this dopamine alarm that there's danger. Again, your boss not, giving you the affirmation and praise you deserve that you've worked really hard for is not a saber-toothed tiger. However, your brain doesn't know the difference. All your brain knows is that you were supposed to get this big, awesome dopamine burst and you didn't. Therefore, we're going to get disoriented. So immediately in that moment, your brain starts to seek. It wants to fix the task. It wants to solve the problem. And often it just wants to stop feeling yucky. So it starts doing stuff to try to fix it, right? And this lack of predictability for something negative happening, it's what causes our brain to go in this tizzy for a moment when we don't know what's going on. We freeze, we flight, we can't think in the moment. And that's when we immediately do stuff like try to make the person who is withholding the anticipated reward happy in the moment, rather than step back and think that through, because your brain is literally disoriented because it did not get what it was supposed to by somebody it should have gotten it from. And that's why we begin to people please, because dopamine is a seeking hormone, right? Like you were going to go down this path and then all of a sudden out of the bush jumps the saber-toothed tiger. And, oh, that's not good. I didn't get my nice, calm walk. I almost got eaten. So in that moment, there's this alarm that goes off and this alert system kicks in when the anticipated result doesn't happen. So what does it do? It starts seeking pleasure, which equates to safety immediately. That's what it does. Whatever it can grab onto that seems safe, that would provide itself pleasure, would be what saves you. And in this instance, making the person who's not pleased with you happy would be the fastest way to assure that you are safe. Because A, this person won't throw you out of the tribe because then you'll be fending for yourself. But B, it wants to have the reward of pleasing the person to get what it expected it deserved.